Hey fam, wanted to do a quick video in the midst of a busy Monday again, sharing my thought processes and or whatever I'm seeing for game week 14 for SorareMLB, which is T minus, I don't know, about 4 hours. So if you haven't watched the first video explaining what these two columns are or what this sheet is or these sheets in general, then feel free to go back and watch that. And in the meantime, I've sorted this so that I can see who my priority players might be or should be, and my priority quadrant over here. The first teams I'm going to look into are, what is that? Mets, Dodgers, St. Louis, and Toronto, and maybe New York. And keeping in mind this was shared over a week ago, we should have known, or at least some of us would have known to target some of Baltimore's left-handed hitters, i.e., Cedric Mullins, Adley Rutschman, and considering there's at least one relatively weaker left-handed pitcher, then Mountcastle might be in play or should be in play. I don't see anything glaring for New York or Toronto, but I did about a month ago target the left-hand bats of Toronto, so this might be a good place, specifically since it's a four-game week for them, so Varsho and Belt. The other team mentioned is St. Louis, so just like last game week, the right-hand bats of St. Louis should do okay because they're facing two left-handed pitchers. Although I'm not expecting what I spoke about last game week because of how good Urias is, and maybe Miley can continue to be good. I don't want to risk it. I lied. It's St. Louis. Of course, I'm going to risk it. And then looking at LA, this might be another Muncy left-hand bat week. I'd be willing to play my right-hand bat of Will Smith because he's probably going to get at least 3 games and a currently weak Steven Matz. And unfortunately, another probably great game week for Betts and JD Martinez and all of LA's right-hand bats. In terms of the 3 game week teams, Cincinnati, of course, a lot of people are probably going to target them. But some of the lesser targeted ones, I'm assuming, are Milwaukee. And if you listen to the episode last week, I'm not gonna play Milwaukee, even though this is obviously a good spot for them, with St. Louis's pitching being so weak at the moment. So the left-hand bats of Telez, Yelich, who actually does pretty well with left-hand bats. I'm sorry, left-hand pitchers, even though he's a left-hand bat. So those players, Winker even, and Adames is probably going to eat. And in terms of Washington, I mentioned last week that I don't usually play Washington, but I think Alex Call might have a chance here. But I do hope since I'm starting Luzardo, he doesn't. So if you have Ruiz or Candelario, this might not be the worst week to play them. And another team highly mentioned last week was Philly's right-hand bats, in part because looking looking well ahead, these two were on the probables list, and again, this sheet was here over a week and a half ago. So hopefully you got to take advantage of that little insight. And the other team also mentioned was Mets and specifically their right-hand bats, Marte, Alonso, and Lindor because he does pretty well right-handed. What I am personally hoping for is Kellenic to do well. Even though it's not a four-game week, he is facing two potentially weak right-handed pitchers, and he did get a day off, but that was in part due to a left-handed pitcher starting, and I hope they saw or plan for him to play all 3 games here. that park just suits him, so I'm hoping he does extremely well. The other team that I'm looking at, because I have the cards, is Houston, Bregman and Abreu specifically. Abreu has done pretty much nothing against left-handed pitchers, and I'm hoping that this would be the week that he gets out of that slump. For the Angels, Shohei should feast as per normal, alongside Trout, of course. And for me personally, since I have Taylor Ward, I'm glad that he's back up top, setting the table for those two. He gets a start over, let's say, the Royals, who, in terms of how tough the pitching matchups are, we start Ward, or let's say MJ Melendez versus Ward, you start Ward because of that potential extra game. Plus, the park factor in Baltimore is significantly better than being in San Diego. And again, I'm a San Diego guy, so I'm not playing my Kansas City Royals this week either because of that. And yes, I'm a moron, and it's okay. I get to enjoy the games, both Sorare MLB and in real life. Anyway, let me go to this page just to verify and see Baltimore versus San Diego. Okay, so Baltimore versus San Diego should be low. Yeah. So 94 versus 102. Huge difference. Plus, the park dimensions fit the Angels bats that was just mentioned. And the other team mentioned was New York, in part, of course, because it's a four-game week. And I'm thinking Rizzo. I wish I had Rizzo because I'm thinking he can absolutely take advantage of these two pitchers, even though Bassett just had a good outing and Gosman is an ace and he is rated highly, but he can have his days, like a couple of game weeks ago. And then looking at some of the teams here, this section jumps out at me. And I don't have Cleveland, but I do have some White Sox, and unfortunately, one is Eloy Jimenez. And if I had him, he'd absolutely play. So if I had Luis Robert, he'd also be in there, as well as Vaughn. Another team I'd be targeting, and it's a no-brainer. Anyone who plays Oakland, right? Arizona. And one of the players I wish I pulled the trigger on was Ketel Marte. Before the season, I was targeting him heavily, but the price point I felt was not good, and I was absolutely wrong because it skyrocketed. Because, and it's sad because this was on paper well before the season started. The matchups just lined up so well, but it is what it is. So, San Diego, I am thinking and I am hoping that this is a major week for Soto. I don't have him or Tatis, but I'm just hoping that this is finally the game that snaps San Diego out of their St. Louis-like slump. So I'm looking for Soto and even Cronenworth to do really well, and the right-hand bats of Machado, Bogarts, and Tatis can only benefit from that because it, of course, makes the lineup that much longer. So this is where everything landed after I filled out my lineups and mixing and matching and doing the typical things of making sure that anyone with a high rating, bat rating, even though they're not in the lowest quadrant to be put in there, unless of course some of the injured ones, or if they are facing my teams. And this is what it's looking like after I put it into the Sorare native site, and I found myself really liking Gallegos because of the whole four game week. He didn't pitch yesterday, and Helsley is not allowed to pitch 2 days in a row. Hope all of this helps, and hope to see you on the leaderboards.